The applause stopped the second the detectives walked in. Margaret O'Connor was standing on a stage, holding a check for $14 million. It was her third jackpot in 3 years. The odds of that happening by chance? Worse than getting struck by lightning, twice. Detectives were certain they'd caught a genius fraudster. They spent 11 months building a cage around her, waiting for one slip-up. And for 1 week in the middle of that investigation, they were sure they had their smoking gun. They were wrong. What actually explained Margaret O'Connor turned out to be far stranger than a crime, and it took a detective hunting for redemption to finally see it. This is the story of how a woman who never broke a single law nearly went down for one anyway, and the secret she was actually hiding in her notebooks. Most lottery winners spend their first night dreaming about what they'll buy. Margaret spent hers organizing receipts. At 48, Margaret was background noise. A modest brick house. A 7-year-old sedan. 26 years as an accounting supervisor. In her world, mistakes weren't dramatic, they were just expensive. She grew up in a world where guessing was a sin. Her grandfather had one rule: don't guess. Look for the pattern. She never forgot it. By her 30s, she recorded everything: fuel prices, grocery trends, the ebb and flow of her neighborhood. Not because she was cheap, but because she'd learned a cold truth: people decide with emotion. Patterns show what the emotion is hiding. One rainy night, she watched a man empty $300 into tickets at a convenience store. "You can't win if you don't play," he laughed. On the drive home, Margaret realized the man was wrong. People aren't gambling against mathematics. They're gambling against their own desperation. That night, she opened a black notebook and wrote 4 words: the cost of hope. She had no idea that notebook would one day sit on an evidence table. For 3 years, Margaret's life ran like a machine. Work. Home. 1 hour with her notebooks. And every Friday, she bought exactly 1 ticket. Never 2. Never 50. Not for better odds, for discipline. On an ordinary Tuesday, she checked her numbers at lunch. First match. Fourth match. She stopped chewing. All 6. $14.8 million. She paid off her mortgage, helped her sister retire, and, to the shock of her coworkers, showed up for work on Monday morning. "I'm not about to let one lucky week change who I am," she said. But then, a year later, it happened again. Every single number. One jackpot is luck. The same woman twice is a headline that doesn't know what to call itself. The Michigan Lottery Commission tore their machines apart. They weighed the balls. They checked the cameras. Everything was perfect. "We don't need proof that something's wrong," one commissioner whispered. "We need proof that nothing is." That's when they called Detective Nathan Voss. Voss was a man hunting for a ghost to save his own career. 2 years earlier, he'd publicly cleared a city contractor of fraud. Months later, a state audit proved the contractor had been stealing for a decade. The headlines called Voss incompetent. He called himself fooled. So when he opened Margaret O'Connor's file and saw no evidence of fraud, he didn't see a conclusion. He saw a challenge. Nobody wins twice by accident, he told his team. He was hunting for a crime to save his reputation, but he was about to realize that the cleanest paperwork sometimes hides the most painful truths. Voss started with the money. Every account, every wire. Clean. He watched hours of surveillance. Margaret always bought her ticket alone. No talking. No insider handshakes. Then came the warrant. Margaret opened the door before they even knocked. "I've been expecting you," she said calmly. "I won twice. I'd be disappointed if nobody investigated." They spent 10 hours tearing her life apart. In a spare bedroom, they found shelves of binders. Not photos or memories, data. Years of it. On the top shelf sat the black notebook, the formula. Voss opened it, expecting a list of predicted numbers. Instead, he found one sentence: randomness cannot be controlled. Human behavior can be understood. 4 days later, Voss found his smoking gun. 11 days before the second jackpot, Margaret had wired $6,200 to a man named Harold Feasby. Feasby wasn't just anyone, he was a former lottery commission employee who had resigned just before Margaret's first win. For Voss, the case was over. A payment to an insider. Timed perfectly. It fit so well, Voss didn't realize he was making the same mistake that ruined him 2 years ago. He was seeing the story he wanted to see. The news leaked. Headlines screamed, "Arrest imminent." Margaret found out from a reporter on her lawn. For the first time, her calm broke. She called her sister, her voice trembling. "They're going to say none of it was real. They're going to say I stole it." Voss walked into the interview with Harold Feasby, ready to make an arrest. Instead, Feasby handed him a hospital receipt. His wife had ovarian cancer. He'd left the commission to care for her. The $6,200 wasn't a bribe, it was a gift. Feasby had been Margaret's grandfather's home health aide years ago. She had quietly stayed in touch and, when she heard about his wife, she sent the money for a second opinion consultation. Voss sat in his car for 20 minutes after that. He had built a tower of guilt out of a woman's secret act of charity. Voss went back to the experts with a new command: don't tell me what I want to hear. The statisticians were blunt: this isn't a cheat sheet. It's a study of why everyone else loses. Margaret wasn't predicting numbers, she was documenting why people chase hot streaks and buy tickets emotionally. Then, the impossible happened. Friday night. 10:17 p.m. Voss's phone rang. She won again. The third win broke the public's brain. People demanded refunds. The lottery's credibility vanished. 3 days later, at the prize ceremony, Voss approached Margaret on stage. "Mrs. O'Connor, help me understand." In the interview room, Margaret slid the notebook across the table. Never spend money you can't afford to lose. Never let excitement decide your budget. Accept that every ticket is probably a losing ticket. Play consistently, not emotionally. That's it? Voss asked. For staying rational, she said. She explained that her formula didn't pick the numbers, it just kept her in the game. It allowed her to play long enough for the impossible math of the universe to finally find her. She dropped an envelope on the table. Inside were thousands of losing tickets. "You investigated my 3 wins," she said quietly. Nobody counted the losses. And nobody counted Harold Feasby's hospital bills until you thought they were a crime. 2 weeks later, the case was closed. No fraud. No algorithm. Just a woman who studied why others lose, and a detective who almost became the very thing he was hunting, a man blinded by his own narrative. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked, "What's the secret to winning?" Margaret smiled. "The only thing I ever learned was how not to lose myself chasing something I couldn't control." She never mentioned Feasby to the press. "Some things," she said, "aren't for the world to know." 3 jackpots made her famous. But it was a wire transfer to a dying woman and an envelope of losing tickets that actually explained who she was. If you're waiting for the part where someone gets caught, you already got it. They just caught the wrong person almost being ruined by a story that was too perfect to be true.